The china plate trembled in my hands as my mother-in-law's words cut through the bustling kitchen. "Rebecca, dear, you can set yourself up at the little table in the sunroom. The help doesn't sit with us during special occasions." Her smile never reached her eyes as she adjusted the crystal centerpiece, not even bothering to look up at me. I stood frozen, the heavy plate of carefully arranged turkey and sides growing cold in my hands, as the chatter and laughter from the formal dining room spilled into the kitchen. My husband Thomas was in there, laughing with his siblings, apparently oblivious to what had just happened. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I asked, convinced I had misheard. We'd been married for 8 months, and while I knew his family came from money, I never imagined they saw me as the help. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, sighed as if I were being deliberately difficult. "The sunroom, Rebecca. We've set up a little space for you there." She gestured vaguely toward the small glass-enclosed porch that jutted off the side of their massive colonial home. "It's quite lovely, actually. You can see the gardens." The gardens were dead. It was late November in Massachusetts, and everything outside was gray and lifeless. "But I'm not the help," I said, my voice barely audible over the clinking of glasses and silverware. "I'm Thomas's wife." Eleanor's perfectly manicured hand paused over the gravy boat she was about to lift. "Yes, well, let's not make this difficult, shall we? It's just how we do things." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We wouldn't want to upset Grandfather Harrison. He's very particular about who sits at his table." I glanced toward the dining room, where I could see the back of an elderly man's head at the far end of the table. Thomas had mentioned his grandfather was visiting, but he hadn't prepared me for this. I'd spent 3 days helping prepare for this meal. I'd peeled potatoes until my fingers were raw, chopped vegetables and stirred sauces. I'd followed Eleanor's exacting instructions to the letter, believing it was my way of bonding with my new family. Never once had she hinted that I wouldn't be joining them to eat. "Does Thomas know about this?" I asked, my voice strengthening as anger began to replace shock. Eleanor's smile tightened. "Rebecca, please don't make a scene. It's Thanksgiving." That's when I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Marisol, the housekeeper who had worked for the Harrisons for 20 years. "Come, Señora," she said quietly. "I will sit with you. We will have our own Thanksgiving." The indignity of it all crashed over me in waves. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being categorized, classified as someone who didn't belong. In that moment, I realized Thomas's family didn't see our marriage as a union between equals. To them, I would always be the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had somehow ensnared their son. I grew up in a small apartment above my parents' diner in a working-class neighborhood. I'd worked my way through nursing school, graduating with honors before meeting Thomas during his medical residency. I'd never been ashamed of my background until now. My face burned as I followed Marisol to the sunroom, where a small card table had been set up with a plain white tablecloth that didn't match the burgundy and gold splendor of the dining room. No centerpiece, no candles, no crystal glasses, just paper napkins and a plastic cup for my water. "I'll get you some wine, Señora," Marisol said, her kind eyes reflecting my humiliation. "Thank you, Marisol, but please call me Rebecca," I said, forcing a smile. "And please, don't trouble yourself. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was fighting back tears as I sat alone at the little table, staring at my cooling food. Where was Thomas? Why hadn't he come looking for me? Did he know this was going to happen? 20 minutes into my solitary meal, the sunroom door opened. I looked up, expecting, hoping to see my husband. Instead, it was Claire, Thomas's younger sister. At 23, she was the family rebel, constantly at odds with their parents' strict social expectations. "This is complete bullshit," she announced, dropping into the chair across from me with her own plate piled high with food. She pulled a flask from the pocket of her dress and took a swig before offering it to me. "Grandfather Harrison is a racist, classist dinosaur, and my parents are spineless for going along with this." I declined the flask, but felt a rush of gratitude for her solidarity. Does Thomas know I'm out here? Claire's expression softened. He thinks you're helping in the kitchen. Mom told him you insisted on making sure everything was perfect before joining. She rolled her eyes. He bought it because he's oblivious when it comes to Mom's manipulations. So this is normal? I asked, pushing my food around my plate, segregating people based on what? My background. It's happened before, Claire admitted. Remember Thomas's college girlfriend, Anissa? Pakistani family, absolutely brilliant, pre-med like him. Grandfather Harrison pulled the same stunt during Easter brunch. Thomas broke up with her 2 weeks later. My stomach twisted into a knot. Did he break up with her because of this? Claire shrugged. Thomas never directly defies the family. He just removes the problem. I put down my fork, appetite completely gone. And I'm the current problem. You're different though, Claire insisted. He actually married you. That's a first. Bringing someone home that wasn't pre-approved by the Harrison Family Council. Before I could respond, the sunroom door opened again. Thomas stood there, his handsome face creased with confusion. There you are, he said, looking between Claire and me. Mom said you were still in the kitchen. What are you doing out here? Claire shot me a meaningful look, and I realized this was a test of both Thomas and our marriage. How I handled this moment would set the tone for my entire relationship with his family. Your mother told me to eat out here, I said, simply watching his face. She said the help doesn't sit with the family during special occasions. Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to something I couldn't quite read. Was it embarrassment? Anger? Guilt? That's ridiculous, he said finally. Come join us at the table. Actually, I said, standing up and gathering my things, I've lost my appetite. I think I'll go upstairs. As I moved past him, he caught my arm. Rebecca, wait. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I said quietly, was mine. I thought I married into a family, not a social hierarchy. I spent the rest of Thanksgiving in our guest room, alternating between tears of humiliation and anger. Thomas came up an hour later, trying to convince me to rejoin the family for dessert. Grandfather Harrison is old-fashioned, he explained, sitting on the edge of the bed while I remained curled in the armchair by the window. Mom was just trying to keep the peace. By treating your wife like a servant, I asked incredulously. Thomas sighed, running his hands through his dark hair. It's not like that. You don't understand how things work in this family. Then explain it to me, I challenged. Explain why it's acceptable to humiliate me in front of everyone. No one was humiliated, he insisted. No one even noticed you weren't there. His words hit me like a slap. No one noticed I wasn't there, including him, apparently, until he wanted to know why I was still in the kitchen. That's worse, Thomas, I said, my voice breaking. That's so much worse. We drove back to Boston the next morning in tense silence. Thomas had spent the night trying to convince me I was overreacting, that his mother meant no harm, that his grandfather was from a different generation. Each excuse only widened the chasm opening between us. Back in our apartment, I tried to process what had happened. Thomas and I had met during my shift at Massachusetts General Hospital. I was finishing my RN rounds when he came in, a handsome, exhausted surgical resident with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor with his patients. We'd fallen into an easy friendship that gradually blossomed into romance. His wealthy background had been apparent, but it had never seemed important. He drove a modest car, lived in a reasonable apartment, and never flaunted his family's money. I'd thought that meant class differences didn't matter to him. Now I wasn't so sure. Over the next few weeks, the Thanksgiving incident, as I came to think of it, hung like a cloud over our marriage. Thomas acted as if nothing had happened, throwing himself into his work at the hospital. I did the same, picking up extra shifts in the emergency department to avoid coming home to our increasingly silent apartment. When we did talk, we carefully circled around the real issue. We discussed grocery lists, medical cases, which streaming shows to watch, anything but his family and their clear disdain for me. December arrived with its usual flurry of holiday preparations. Thomas brought up Christmas plans over breakfast one morning, casually mentioning that his parents expected us at their vacation home in Aspen. "I'm not going," I said firmly, not looking up from my coffee. Thomas put down his toast. "Rebecca, please don't make this difficult. It's Christmas." I met his gaze, struck by how closely his words echoed his mother's. "Will your grandfather be there?" "Yes, but—" "Will I be allowed to sit at the table this time, or should I bring a TV tray for the servants' quarters?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It's not fair. None of this is fair." I stood up, suddenly unable to continue the charade of normalcy. "I'm going to my parents for Christmas. You're welcome to join me, but I understand if you'd rather be with your family." The hurt in his eyes was genuine, but so was the relief. Relief that he wouldn't have to choose between me and his family. That told me everything I needed to know. Christmas with my parents was a healing balm. Our tiny artificial tree, the mismatched ornaments collected over decades, my mother's slightly burnt cookies, all of it felt honest and real. My parents didn't ask why Thomas wasn't with us, and I didn't volunteer the information. They'd always been careful not to interfere in my marriage, though I could see the concern in their eyes. Thomas sent a text on Christmas morning, a generic "Merry Christmas, miss you," that could have been sent to a casual acquaintance. I replied with equal blandness, then turned off my phone for the rest of the day. January brought a new kind of cold to our marriage. We were polite strangers sharing living space, neither willing to address the growing distance between us. I began to wonder if this was how marriages ended, not with dramatic fights, but with the slow death of silent dinners and separate vacations. The breaking point came during a hospital fundraiser in late January. As a surgical resident, Thomas was expected to attend and bring his spouse. I went through the motions, putting on a cocktail dress and heels, plastering a smile on my face as Thomas introduced me to colleagues and administrators. Midway through the evening, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I was washing my hands, I overheard two women at the sinks beside me. "That's Rebecca Chun, isn't it?" one said to the other. "Thomas Harrison's wife." God, can you imagine? The Harrisons must be mortified. I heard from Eleanor that they made her eat in the sunroom at Thanksgiving like one of the staff. They laughed, not unkindly, but with the casual cruelty of people discussing someone they viewed as beneath them. Eleanor says she's counting the days until the divorce. Apparently Thomas admitted he made a mistake. These mixed marriages never last anyway. My hands froze under the water. Mixed marriage? They made it sound like we were from different planets, not different neighborhoods in the same city. More alarming was the claim that Thomas had admitted to making a mistake. Had he really said that to his mother? Was he already planning our divorce without talking to me? I returned to the ballroom in a daze, searching for my husband in the crowd. I spotted him across the room, deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of surgery and a woman I recognized as Dr. Vivian Taylor, a brilliant neurosurgeon who also happened to be the daughter of one of Boston's oldest families. The kind of woman the Harrisons would approve of. Thomas's hand rested casually on Dr. Taylor's arm as they laughed at something she said. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about the gesture, but the ease of it struck me. When was the last time he had touched me with such casual affection? I watched them for several long minutes, noticing how animated Thomas became in her presence. It wasn't necessarily romantic. It could have been professional admiration or simple friendship, but it highlighted the growing distance between us. He looked comfortable, relaxed, unguarded. Everything he hadn't been with me since Thanksgiving. I slipped out of the fundraiser without saying goodbye. Thomas didn't call until 2 hours later, when I was already in bed with the lights off, pretending to be asleep when he came home. The next morning, I confronted him with what I'd overheard in the bathroom. "Did you tell your mother our marriage was a mistake?" I asked as he prepared to leave for his shift. Thomas froze, his hand on the doorknob. "Of course not. Because according to Eleanor, you admitted you made a mistake marrying me." He turned to face me, his expression guarded. "I would never say that." "But you might think it," I pressed. Thomas sighed heavily. "Rebecca, I don't know what you want from me. Ever since Thanksgiving, you've been looking for proof that I don't love you, that my family has somehow corrupted me against you. It's exhausting." "What's exhausting is being married to someone who won't stand up for me," I countered. "Who cares more about family tradition than his wife's dignity?" "That's not fair." "You keep saying that, but you never explain why it's not fair. Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one being treated unfairly in this situation." Thomas checked his watch. "I can't do this right now. I have surgery in an hour." "You can never do this right now," I said quietly. "That's the problem." After he left, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. I spent the day walking around Boston, trying to clear my head and figure out what I wanted. Did I want to fight for this marriage? Did I want to spend the rest of my life trying to prove myself worthy of the illustrious Harrison family name? By evening, I had my answer. When Thomas came home, I was sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of cold tea. "We need to talk," I said. Thomas nodded, his shoulders slumping as he sat across from me. "I know. I can't do this anymore," I began. "I can't be in a marriage where I'm constantly being measured and found wanting, where your family treats me like an embarrassment and you say nothing." "What do you want me to do, Rebecca?" he asked, frustration edging his voice. "Cut off my entire family? They're not perfect, but they're still my family." "I wanted you to stand up for me," I said simply. "To tell your mother that her behavior was unacceptable. To show your grandfather that respecting your wife is non-negotiable. I never asked you to choose between us. They did that when they decided I wasn't good enough to sit at their table." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "I love you," he said finally, "but I don't know how to fix this." "I'm not sure it can be fixed," I admitted. "Not unless something fundamentally changes." We left it there, an unresolved conversation hanging in the air between us. Thomas slept in the guest room that night and the night after that. By the third night, it had become our new normal. February arrived with bitter winds and snow that turned quickly to gray slush on the Boston streets. Thomas and I continued our polite coexistence, neither moving toward reconciliation nor divorce. We were trapped in limbo, waiting for something to push us one way or the other. That push came in the form of Eleanor Harrison on a bright Sunday morning in mid-February. I opened our apartment door to find my mother-in-law standing there in a camel hair coat and pearls, her expression inscrutable. "Rebecca," she said with a nod. "May I come in?" Thomas was at the hospital, working a weekend shift. I was alone, faced with the architect of my marital unhappiness, asking permission to enter my home. I stepped aside, allowing her in. "Thomas isn't here." "I know," she said, removing her gloves. "I came to see you." I led her to the living room, offering coffee, which she declined. We sat facing each other like diplomats from hostile nations, each measuring the other carefully. "Thomas tells me you've been having difficulties," she began. I raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to put it." Eleanor sighed, folding her hands in her lap. "I assume I'm meant to apologize for Thanksgiving. Are you going to? Would it make a difference?" I considered this. "I don't know. It might have 3 months ago." Eleanor nodded as if I'd confirmed something for her. "You know, when Thomas first told us he was marrying a nurse from Dorchester, we were concerned. Not because of your profession. Nursing is admirable work. But because we wondered if you could adapt to our way of life. Your way of life being one where people are judged by their bank accounts and family names." A flicker of irritation crossed her perfectly composed face. Our way of life includes certain responsibilities, certain expectations. The Harrison name opens doors, but it also carries obligations, like segregating people at holiday dinners, like maintaining traditions that have sustained our family for generations, she countered. Thomas understands these obligations. We thought you might come to understand them too. I shook my head in disbelief. I will never understand treating people as less than because of where they come from. No, Eleanor said thoughtfully. I suppose you won't. She stood, reaching for her purse. Which is why I've come to make you an offer. An offer? She withdrew an envelope and placed it on the coffee table between us. The Harrison family is prepared to be extremely generous in the event of a divorce. This would allow you to relocate, perhaps advance your education, start fresh without financial concerns. I stared at the envelope, unable to process what was happening. My mother-in-law was offering to buy me out of my marriage. Does Thomas know about this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Thomas is a Harrison, she said, as if that explained everything. He may be infatuated with you, but eventually he'll remember his responsibilities to the family. We're simply offering a way to make the inevitable less painful for everyone involved. I picked up the envelope, my hands trembling with a combination of rage and shock. Without opening it, I tore it in half, then in quarters. Get out of my home, I said quietly. Eleanor's expression never changed. I understand you're upset. The offer remains open, should you reconsider. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I don't dislike you, Rebecca. In different circumstances, I think you might have made Thomas quite happy. But you'll never fit into our world, and eventually that reality will destroy whatever love exists between you. After she left, I sat motionless on the couch, the torn envelope at my feet. Was she right? Was our marriage doomed by forces beyond our control? When Thomas came home that evening, I told him about his mother's visit and her generous offer. The color drained from his face. She did what? For the first time in months, I saw genuine anger in his eyes, not directed at me, but at his mother's interference. It gave me a flicker of hope that perhaps he wasn't as complicit in his family's machinations as I'd feared. Did you know she was going to do this? I asked. God, no, he said vehemently. I would never. Rebecca, you have to believe me. I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, I still loved him. But his mother's visit had crystallized something for me. If our marriage was going to survive, something dramatic needed to change. I need you to make a choice, I said finally. Not between me and your family, but between the person you were raised to be and the person you want to be. Because I can't keep living like this, Thomas. I won't be treated as disposable. Thomas sat heavily on the couch, the weight of my ultimatum settling on his shoulders. What are you asking me to do? Stand up for us, I said simply. Show me that our marriage means more to you than your family's approval. Show me that the man I fell in love with, the kind, compassionate doctor who treated every patient with dignity regardless of their background, is still in there somewhere. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze fixed on the torn envelope. Finally, he looked up at me, determination replacing the conflict in his eyes. Okay, he said, let's fix this. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Thomas on the phone in our kitchen. His voice was firm in a way I hadn't heard in months. No, Mother, this isn't negotiable. Because she's my wife. I don't care what Grandfather thinks. No, I won't be at Sunday dinner. Yes, this is about Thanksgiving and about yesterday, and about every time you've made Rebecca feel unwelcome. I slipped out of bed and stood in the hallway, listening as my husband finally drew a line with his family. A warm feeling spread through my chest. Hope, fragile but persistent. Thomas hung up and turned to find me in the doorway. How much did you hear? Enough, I said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. Thank you. He shook his head. Don't thank me for doing what I should have done months ago. He sat at the kitchen table, gesturing for me to join him. I spoke with Dr. Winters last night after you went to bed. Your therapist? I asked, surprised. Thomas had started seeing Dr. Winters 6 months into our marriage, though he rarely discussed their sessions with me. Yes, I've been working through some things about my family for a while now. He took a deep breath. Rebecca, I owe you an apology. Not just for Thanksgiving, but for every time I failed to stand up for you, for us. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, the warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had permeated our marriage for months. I appreciate that, but… Let me finish, he said gently. Dr. Winters helped me see something I've been avoiding. I've spent my entire life trying to meet impossible expectations. The perfect son, the brilliant doctor, the worthy Harrison heir. Every decision filtered through what my family would approve of. His voice cracked slightly. When I met you, it was the first time I'd done something just because it made me happy. You made me happy, Rebecca. You still do. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Then why didn't you defend me when your mother said those awful things? When your grandfather treated me like I was invisible? Because I'm a coward, he admitted, his honesty startling both of us. Because standing up to my family means acknowledging that so much of what I was raised to believe is wrong. It means facing the possibility of losing them. And I was afraid. I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. I never wanted you to lose your family, Thomas. I just wanted to be treated with respect. I know that now. He squeezed my hand, and I've made a decision. I called Dr. Reyes at San Francisco General yesterday. They still want me for that fellowship we discussed last year. My breath caught. The fellowship in trauma surgery at San Francisco General had been Thomas's dream, but he turned it down when his father insisted he stay in Boston to continue the Harrison legacy at Massachusetts General. What about your father's plans for you at MGH? They were his plans, not mine. Thomas leaned forward, his expression more determined than I'd ever seen it. I'm 31 years old, Rebecca. It's time I started living my life for me, for us, instead of for the Harrison family name. Are you sure about this? I asked, afraid to believe that things could change so dramatically. I've never been more sure of anything. He stood up, pulling me to my feet and into his arms. I love you, Rebecca Chin Harrison, and I'm done letting anyone make you feel like you don't belong at my side. For the first time in months, I felt the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen. We weren't fixed, not by a long shot, but at least we were finally moving in the right direction. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of applications, interviews, and planning. The fellowship at San Francisco General wouldn't start until July, but we decided a clean break from Boston was needed. I applied for nursing positions at several San Francisco hospitals and was thrilled when SF General offered me a spot in their emergency department. Thomas's family reacted predictably to our announcement. His father, William, called to inform Thomas that he was making the biggest mistake of his life and that his position at MGH would not be held for him when he inevitably came to his senses. His mother sent a series of increasingly manipulative emails, ranging from guilt, "This will destroy your grandfather," to threats, "Your trust fund is not unconditional," to faux concern, "We're worried about your mental health, darling." Through it all, Thomas remained steadfast. He forwarded each email to Dr. Winters without responding, a strategy they developed to help him maintain boundaries while processing the emotional manipulation. The only family member who supported us was Claire, who showed up at our apartment one evening with a bottle of champagne. "To your prison break," she toasted, clinking her glass against ours. "I always knew you had it in you, Tommy." "I should have done it years ago," Thomas admitted. Claire nodded thoughtfully. "Mom's on the warpath, you know. She's telling everyone you're having some sort of breakdown." I tensed, but Thomas just laughed. "Of course she is. Heaven forbid a Harrison make their own choices. They've already started grooming cousin Philip to take your place, Claire continued. Dad's talking about getting him into MGH for his residency. Poor Philip, Thomas said with genuine sympathy. Maybe we should rescue him too. Claire grinned. One Harrison rebellion at a time, big brother. She turned to me. Seriously though, Rebecca, thank you for being the catalyst this family needed. Watching Tommy stand up to them has been inspiring. After she left, Thomas found me on the balcony, looking out at the Boston skyline. Penny for your thoughts, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I was just thinking about your mother's visit, I admitted. She was so certain I would never fit into your world. She was right, Thomas said, surprising me, but she was asking the wrong question. The real question wasn't whether you could fit into the Harrison world, but whether that world was worth preserving. He turned me to face him. I choose our world, Rebecca, the one we build together. As February turned to March, we prepared for our move to San Francisco. Thomas was scheduled to complete his residency at MGH in June, and I had given notice at my job. We found an apartment in San Francisco, nothing fancy, but with a balcony overlooking the bay, and began the process of untangling our lives from Boston. Thomas's mother made one final attempt to change his mind in late March, appearing at the hospital during his shift. According to the nurse who witnessed it, Eleanor demanded Thomas come to his senses and stop throwing away his future for that girl. Thomas, in the middle of rounds, reportedly told his mother that his future was with that girl, and if Eleanor couldn't respect his wife, she wasn't welcome in his life. He then excused himself to check on a patient, leaving Eleanor standing open-mouthed in the corridor. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. I might have burned the last bridge with my mother today, he said as he loosened his tie. Apparently, there are rules about making scenes in hospitals. I handed him a glass of wine. Are you okay? He considered the question seriously. Strangely, yes. It felt good to finally say what I've been thinking for months. He took a sip of wine. My whole life, I've been taught that family legacy is everything. That being a Harrison means something special. His expression shifted to something more peaceful. But you know what? Being your husband means more. 3 months after Thanksgiving, on a cold February day, Eleanor Harrison had offered me money to walk away from my marriage. Now, as we packed up our apartment and prepared for our new life in California, I realized her offer had actually saved us. It had forced Thomas to confront the toxic dynamics in his family and make a choice about the kind of man he wanted to be. We decided to spend our last Easter on the East Coast with my family. My parents' apartment above the diner was cramped with all of us there. My 2 younger brothers and their girlfriends, my grandmother, and various aunts and uncles who drifted in and out throughout the day. It's chaotic, Thomas whispered to me as my brothers argued over whether the Red Sox would make the playoffs this year. I love it. My mother overheard him and patted his cheek affectionately. Family is supposed to be chaotic, sweetie. That's how you know it's real. The contrast to the formal, stilted gatherings at the Harrison estate couldn't have been more stark. Here there were no assigned seats, no proper china, no rigid expectations about who belonged where. People ate when they were hungry, sat where they found space, and arguments were conducted loudly but without lasting rancor. Thomas fit in seamlessly, helping my father with the dishes, discussing hospital politics with my aunt who worked as a radiology technician, even joining my brother's increasingly heated sports debate. Not once did he look uncomfortable or out of place, despite being surrounded by people whose backgrounds and experiences were so different from his own. Your young man seems happy, my grandmother observed as we sat together in the tiny living room, watching Thomas laugh at something my brother had said. I think he is, I agreed. She patted my hand. Good. Every bird needs to find its own nest, not the one others build for it. That evening, as we prepared to leave, my father pulled Thomas aside while my mother hugged me goodbye. I couldn't hear what was said, but Thomas nodded seriously, and when he rejoined me, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Everything okay?" I asked as we walked to our car. "Your dad just welcomed me to the family," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Said he was proud to have me as a son-in-law." I squeezed his hand. "My family's pretty great." "They are," he agreed. "They're what family is supposed to be." Our last weeks in Boston flew by in a blur of paperwork, packing, and goodbyes. Thomas finished his residency with honors, despite the frosty attitude from certain administrators who were close with his father. I worked my final shifts at MGH, saying goodbye to colleagues who had become friends over the years. Claire threw us a going-away party at her apartment, inviting our friends and conspicuously none of the Harrison family. At the end of the evening, she handed Thomas an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Grandfather Harrison's latest will," she said with a mischievous smile. "I may have borrowed it from Dad's study. Thought you might want to know where you stand before you leave." Thomas hesitated, then handed the envelope back without opening it. "I don't care any more, Claire. Whatever he's leaving me or not leaving me, it doesn't matter." She looked surprised. "Are you sure? It's a lot of money, Tommy." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "Rebecca and I will be fine on our own." Claire's expression softened. "You really have changed." She glanced at me. "She's good for you, you know." "I know," Thomas said, smiling at me across the room. "That's why I married her." 2 days before our scheduled departure for San Francisco, we received an unexpected visitor. Thomas's grandfather Harrison, the family patriarch, arrived unannounced at our half-packed apartment. "Grandfather," Thomas said, clearly shocked. "What are you doing here?" Harrison Whitfield III was a formidable figure even at 84. Tall and straight-backed, with piercing blue eyes and a full head of silver hair, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had always gotten his way. "I understand you're abandoning your position at Massachusetts General," he said without preamble, "throwing away everything your father and I have built for you." Thomas tensed beside me. "I'm accepting a fellowship at San Francisco General. It's a great opportunity." Harrison snorted. "A second-rate hospital on the wrong coast." His gaze shifted to me. "And all for her, I'm told." I braced for Thomas to falter under his grandfather's disapproval, but he surprised me. "Not for her, grandfather. With her. There's a difference." Thomas's voice was calm but firm. "Rebecca is my wife, and San Francisco is where we've decided to build our life together." Harrison studied Thomas for a long moment, then turned his attention to me. "You're the girl who caused a scene at Thanksgiving." "I didn't cause a scene," I said, meeting his gaze. "I was told to eat in the sunroom because the help doesn't sit with the family. I simply chose to go upstairs instead." "Eleanor can be traditional," Harrison acknowledged with a slight nod. "But you must understand, young lady, that the Harrison family has certain standards. Thomas was raised to uphold those standards." "With all due respect, sir," I replied, "if those standards include treating people differently based on their background or bank account, perhaps they're not worth upholding." I felt Thomas's hand slip into mine, a silent show of support. His grandfather noticed the gesture, his expression unreadable. "You speak your mind," he observed. "Unusual in a young woman these days." "Rebecca has never pretended to be something she's not," Thomas said. "That's one of the many reasons I love her." Harrison harumphed, moving to the window to look out at the Boston skyline. "William tells me you've thrown away your inheritance over this situation." "If by situation you mean my marriage, then yes," Thomas confirmed. "Though I didn't throw it away, grandfather. It was taken from me as punishment for making my own choices." "And you're at peace with that decision?" Harrison asked, still facing the window. "Completely." Harrison turned back to us, his expression softening slightly. "Your great-grandmother was Irish, did you know that?" a housemaid at my grandfather's estate in Connecticut. My father married her despite everyone's objections. Thomas and I exchanged surprised glances. This piece of family history had never been mentioned before. The family threatened to disinherit him, Harrison continued, called it a disgrace to the bloodline. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. My mother was the most intelligent woman I've ever known. She taught herself law by reading my grandfather's books, then convinced him to send her to college. She was one of the first female graduates of Yale Law School. He moved closer, studying my face with new interest. What did you do before you married my grandson? I'm a nurse, I said. Emergency medicine. And you're continuing your career in San Francisco? Yes, I've accepted a position at SF General. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Good. A woman should have her own means, her own purpose. He turned to Thomas. Your father thinks you're having some sort of breakdown. Eleanor is convinced this young woman has some hold over you. And what do you think, grandfather? Thomas asked cautiously. I think, Harrison said slowly, that you might have more of my father in you than I realized. He straightened his jacket. I'm not going to pretend to approve of all this, Thomas. Leaving Boston, turning your back on MGH, these are significant departures from our family's expectations. Thomas tensed, preparing for another battle, but Harrison held up a hand. However, he continued, a man must choose his own path. If San Francisco is where you believe your future lies, then perhaps it's time the Harrison family expanded its horizons beyond New England. It wasn't exactly a blessing, but coming from Harrison Whitfield III, it was as close as we were likely to get. Thank you, grandfather, Thomas said, clearly moved by this unexpected show of support. Harrison nodded curtly. Yes, well, keep me informed of your progress at this San Francisco hospital, and he hesitated. Perhaps at Thanksgiving this year, if you decide to visit, we can all dine together. In the dining room, he added with a pointed look at me. After he left, Thomas sat heavily on our couch. Did that really just happen? I sat beside him, equally stunned. I think your grandfather might actually have a heart beneath all that Harrison pride. A small one, Thomas agreed with a laugh. But it's there. 2 days later, we boarded our flight to San Francisco. As the plane took off, I watched Boston grow smaller beneath us, the city where we'd met, fallen in love, and nearly lost each other. Having second thoughts, Thomas asked, noticing my pensive expression. I turned to him, this man who had finally become the person I always knew he could be. Not even for a second. Me neither, he said, lacing his fingers through mine. Though I do have one regret. What's that? That it took me so long to realize what was truly important. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to mine. I promise you, Rebecca, you'll never eat alone at a family dinner again. I smiled, thinking of how far we'd come since that awful Thanksgiving. I'm going to hold you to that, Dr. Harrison. As the plane headed west toward our new beginning, I reflected on Eleanor's visit 3 months earlier. She had been right about one thing. I would never fit into the Harrison family mold. But she had been wrong about what that meant for our marriage. Thomas didn't need me to fit into his old world. He needed the courage to build a new one with me, one without inherited prejudices or outdated traditions. And somewhere over Ohio, 30,000 feet above the ground, I finally allowed myself to believe that we were going to be okay. More than okay, we were going to be happy. Not because I had changed to meet the Harrison standards, but because Thomas had found the strength to question them. 3 months after I ate Thanksgiving dinner alone in a sunroom, we were flying toward a future neither of us could have imagined that day. One where we defined our own family traditions, where respect wasn't determined by pedigree, and where love was more important than legacy. What are you thinking about? Thomas asked as he returned from the bathroom, sliding back into his seat beside me. Thanksgiving, I admitted. And how much can change in just a few months? He took my hand, bringing it to his lips. Next Thanksgiving will be different, I promise. It already is, I said, resting my head on his shoulder as the plane carried us toward our new life. We already are.